There is a moment you know well. You are sitting somewhere that should feel fine, maybe even good, and yet something in you is already reaching for the exit. You pick up your phone without deciding to. You pour another drink you did not want. You flip to another tab, start another series, plan a trip you will probably not take, scroll through the lives of people you have never met. And then, somewhere beneath all of that motion, beneath all of that reaching, there is a stillness you are running from. A quiet that you cannot quite face. And what makes this so strange, what makes it genuinely puzzling when you sit with it honestly, is that no one is chasing you. There is no threat. There is only the open space of your own life and the fact that you have been fleeing it for longer than you can remember. This is not a character flaw. It is not laziness or weakness or some deficiency you need to correct with the right morning routine or the right productivity system. What you are experiencing is something far more fundamental than that. Something that touches the very structure of how human beings relate to their own existence. You have been taught in ways so subtle and so pervasive that they feel like nature rather than instruction, to treat your own inner life as a problem to be solved, a discomfort to be escaped, a silence to be filled. And so you have become extraordinarily good at filling it. The tragedy is not that you fail to enjoy your life. The tragedy is that you never quite show up to it. The philosopher Hannah Arendt spent much of her intellectual life examining the relationship between human beings and the conditions of their own existence. She was interested in what it means to be free, not in the abstract political sense alone, but in the deeper sense of what it means to actually inhabit your own life with full presence and full responsibility. And what she discovered, through her analysis of the public and private realms, through her examination of how modern life changes the structure of human experience, was something that most people in her time and ours have preferred not to look at directly. She found that freedom is not something most people want as much as they think they do. Or rather, she found that what people call freedom is very often the freedom to escape from freedom itself. That might sound like a riddle, but stay with it, because what it points to is something you have almost certainly lived. Real freedom, the kind Arendt was interested in, is not the freedom to do whatever you want whenever you want. It is something harder and stranger than that. It is the freedom to be the author of your own existence, to make genuine choices that spring from a genuine self, to act in the world rather than merely react to it, to be present to the open and unscripted quality of your own life without immediately rushing to close it down. And that kind of freedom is uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable in the way that standing at the edge of something vast is uncomfortable, not because it is dangerous, but because it is real. Most of what passes for freedom in modern life is actually a flight from this. When you scroll for 40 minutes through content you barely register, you are not free. You are occupied. When you chase the next achievement, the next relationship, the next version of yourself that will finally feel like enough, you are not expressing your freedom. You are hiding inside a structure that tells you what to want next, so you do not have to sit with the question of what you actually want at all. When you fill every silence with noise and every moment of stillness with stimulation, you are not living freely. You are running from the one thing that could actually give your life weight and meaning, your own presence to it. If this is resonating with you, if you are feeling the particular discomfort of recognition right now, consider subscribing. I explore these questions every week, and I would be honored to have you along for this ongoing conversation about what it actually means to be free. Here is what makes this so hard to see clearly. The escape routes are always disguised as something else. They are dressed up as productivity, as self-improvement, as connection, as ambition. You are not running away, you are getting things done. You are not avoiding your inner life, you are building towards something. You are not escaping yourself, you are just staying busy, which everyone knows is virtuous. The social world colludes with you in this disguise. It rewards the person who is always doing, always achieving, always optimizing, always improving. It offers very little reward and considerable suspicion to the person who sits with themselves without agenda, who faces the open space of their own existence without immediately rushing to fill it with productivity. Arendt drew a distinction that is useful here between what she called the vita activa and the vita contemplativa, the active life and the contemplative life. In her reading of Western history, the vita activa had come to dominate completely, and within it what she called labor. The endless cycle of need and satisfaction and need again had come to swallow what she considered the higher human capacities for work and genuine action. What this means in practical terms is that we have organized modern existence almost entirely around the logic of consumption and busyness, around the filling of needs and the generating of new needs to fill, in a loop that never arrives anywhere and never quite satisfies, precisely because it is not designed to satisfy. It is designed to continue. You have felt this. You finish one thing and there is immediately another. You reach one goal and the sense of completion lasts perhaps a day, perhaps a week, before the horizon reasserts itself and you are again oriented towards something you do not yet have. You thought the problem was that you had not achieved enough. You thought the problem was circumstances or timing or bad luck or the wrong relationship or the wrong city. But the problem is structural. The problem is that you have been living inside a mode of existence that is fundamentally incompatible with the kind of presence and depth that actually makes life feel worth living. And here is the part that most self-help thinking gets wrong. It diagnoses the flight correctly, but then offers you another thing to run toward. It tells you to run toward mindfulness, toward gratitude, toward your best self, toward the life you truly want. And you run. And for a while, it feels different. And then the structure reasserts itself, and you are back at the beginning, reaching for something just ahead of you, never quite here. The escape is still happening. Only the destination has changed. I want to pause here, because I know that some of you watching this have been struggling with this for a long time. Not just in the abstract way of someone who is vaguely dissatisfied, but in the very real, sometimes frightening way of someone who no longer trusts themselves to simply be. Someone who looks at an unstructured afternoon and feels something close to panic. Someone who cannot sit in a waiting room without a phone in their hand, cannot fall asleep without a podcast filling the dark, cannot eat alone without a screen for company. If that is you, I want you to know something. You are not broken. What you are experiencing is the logical consequence of living in a world that has spent decades teaching you that your own unmediated experience is something to be managed, improved, or escaped. You learned this lesson very well. Unlearning it will take time and a different kind of attention. Let me ask you something directly. How long have you been filling the silence? Not in a casual sense, but in the deep sense, the sense of not being able to be alone with your own thoughts without immediately reaching for a distraction. When did that start? I would genuinely like to know, because your answer matters, not just for you, but for everyone watching this who has never said it out loud before. If you have never talked about this, not to a friend, not to anyone, if this is the first time you have heard someone describe what you actually experience inside, then I want you to do something. Just write in the comments, "I have been running from the quiet." That is all. Just that. Because when you name it, something shifts. You stop being alone with it. And someone else watching right now needs to see those words. They need to know that what they feel is real, and that they are not the only one who feels it. Now let us go deeper, because understanding the surface of the problem is not the same as understanding its roots. Arendt was deeply interested in what she called the space of appearance, the space in which we show up as who we are, in which we act and speak and reveal ourselves to the world and to ourselves. She believed that this space was not given, not automatic, not something that happened to you. She believed it had to be brought into being through genuine action, through the willingness to appear, to take a position, to be visible in the fullest sense of the word. And what she observed, with considerable sadness, was that modernity had made this kind of genuine appearance increasingly difficult. Not because people lacked the courage necessarily, but because the conditions for it were being systematically eroded. What does it mean to appear in this sense? It means more than being seen. Everyone is seen. Every post on every platform is a form of visibility. But appearance in Arendt's deeper sense means showing up as an authentic agent, as someone who is genuinely present to their own choices and genuinely responsible for them. It means inhabiting your own life rather than performing it. And this is precisely what the escape prevents. When you are always running, always filling, always optimizing and improving and distracting, you are never quite here. You are never quite the author of your own experience. You are a spectator to a life that moves too fast for any real contact with it. Think about the moments in your life that you would call genuinely alive. Not the moments of achievement or pleasure, though those have their place, but the moments of genuine contact, of being truly present to what is happening. Perhaps it was a conversation that surprised you with its depth. Perhaps it was a morning in a place you had never been, when the strangeness of the surroundings forced you to actually look. Perhaps it was a moment of grief or beauty so sharp that all the noise stopped, and you were, for a few seconds, completely here. Notice what those moments have in common. They did not happen while you were optimizing. They did not happen while you were scrolling or achieving or fleeing. They happened when the usual motion stopped, and you were, for whatever reason, unable to escape. You were free in the full sense, unoccupied, present, alive to what was actually in front of you. This is not a coincidence. This is the structure of genuine experience. It cannot be consumed, it cannot be achieved, it cannot be scheduled or optimized. It can only be encountered when the flight stops long enough for reality to arrive. And here is the most disorienting thing about this. You already know how to do this. You have done it. The capacity for full presence is not something you need to acquire. It is something you need to stop fleeing. The difference is enormous. Arendt had a concept she called natality, which she considered one of the most important features of the human condition. Natality is the fact of birth, not just the biological event, but what it represents philosophically, the capacity to begin. She wrote that every human being is a beginning, that each new person introduces something unprecedented into the world, that with each birth a new world begins, and by extension with each genuine act, something genuinely new enters the world. This was, for her, the ground of freedom. Not freedom from constraint, but freedom as the power of initiation, of beginning, of bringing something new into existence. What strikes me about this concept in relation to what we are exploring today is that natality requires presence. You cannot begin if you are not here. You cannot initiate if you are living 3 steps ahead of yourself in a future you are trying to control, or 3 steps behind yourself in a past you are trying to understand or escape. The new thing that you are capable of bringing into the world, the genuine act that only you could perform, the beginning that is yours and yours alone, it can only happen in this moment, in this actual life, in the concrete and sometimes uncomfortable circumstances of your actual existence right now. The flight from yourself is always also a flight from this. When you escape into distraction, you are not merely wasting time. You are refusing, in a very specific way, the radical responsibility of your own freedom. You are choosing to be determined rather than free, to be occupied rather than open, to be a consumer of experience rather than its author. And this is not a moral failing. I want to be very clear about that. It is a learned response to conditions that made genuine presence feel dangerous or impossible, but it has a cost, and the cost is not primarily the time lost or the goals unmet. The cost is the slow accumulation of an unlived life. There is a thought experiment worth sitting with. Imagine that all the escape routes were suddenly unavailable. No phone, no screen, no project to focus on, no plan to make. Just you, in a room, with your own thoughts and the particular texture of this afternoon. What would arise? Most people find when they actually try this even briefly, that what arises first is not peace. What arises first is discomfort, restlessness, a kind of low-level anxiety that has been there all along, just beneath the noise. And then, if you stay with it rather than fleeing it, something else begins to happen. The thoughts slow. The restlessness has an edge that eventually softens, and beneath the discomfort is something quieter, something that was waiting there before all the noise began. What is that? Different traditions have different words for it. Arendt might have called it the self in its most native state, the thinking self, the one who, when freed from the pressure of performance and consumption and escape, begins the activity she considered most essentially human, thinking. Not solving, not producing, not consuming. Just the silent dialogue with oneself that she called the two-in-one, the internal conversation through which a human being becomes, in the deepest sense, present to their own existence. This is what the escape interrupts. And this is what becomes possible when the escape stops. Now, understanding this is not the same as being able to do it. Knowing that you have been fleeing does not automatically give you the capacity to stay. This is where most philosophical insight fails people in practice. They see the truth of it, they feel the recognition, and then they pick up their phones 5 minutes later and the cycle continues. This is not hypocrisy. It is the nature of deeply ingrained patterns meeting genuine insight. The insight is necessary, but not sufficient. What is also required is a different relationship with discomfort. The discomfort you feel when you put down the phone and sit with yourself is not evidence that something is wrong. It is evidence that something real is happening. The restlessness is not a problem to be solved. It is the feeling of your nervous system adjusting to actual freedom after a long period of occupation. When a room has been full of noise for years and the noise suddenly stops, the silence does not feel peaceful at first. It feels strange and too large. That strangeness is not a signal to restore the noise. It is the beginning of actually inhabiting the space. Arendt believed deeply in the examined life, not as a luxury or a philosophical hobby, but as the condition for genuine humanity. She was horrified by what she called thoughtlessness, the state of acting without thinking, of moving through the world on automatic, driven by habit and social convention and the path of least resistance, without ever genuinely asking, "What am I doing and why am I doing it?" She believed this thoughtlessness was one of the most dangerous human capacities, capable in political life of enabling atrocities through the sheer force of banality, of ordinary routine unexamined. But in personal life, thoughtlessness has its own quieter devastation. It produces a life that was never actually chosen, a self that was never actually inhabited, a freedom that was owned but never exercised. This is what reprogramming means in the serious and not gimmicky sense of the word. It does not mean overriding your brain with positive affirmations. It does not mean replacing one set of habits with another through sheer willpower. It means becoming a genuine participant in your own inner life. It means developing the capacity to notice when you are reaching for an escape route before the reaching becomes automatic. It means sitting with the question of what you are actually fleeing from when you flee. Not to punish yourself for fleeing, but to understand what is being avoided, what is being protected, what wound or fear, or simply what largeness of open space is being covered over by all that busyness. This is slow work. It is not dramatic. There is no breakthrough moment that makes it suddenly easy. There is instead a gradual accumulation of moments in which you chose, just slightly more than you used to stay, to let the discomfort be there without immediately resolving it, to sit in the open space of your own life long enough to begin to feel it as yours rather than as a threat. And over time, something changes. Not because you fixed yourself, but because you stopped fixing yourself and started inhabiting yourself instead. There is a difference, and it is everything. Let me tell you about what becomes possible on the other side of this, not as a promised destination, but as a description of what genuine presence actually feels like. When you stop fleeing, when you genuinely stop, not in the forced and effortful way of someone gritting their teeth through meditation, but in the natural way of someone who has simply become less afraid, the quality of ordinary experience changes. The afternoon light through a window, which you have been walking past for years without seeing, begins to register. A conversation with someone you love, which you have been half present to for as long as you can remember, suddenly has a depth and a weight that you had forgotten was possible. You eat a meal and actually taste it. You walk somewhere and actually arrive. These things sound small. They are not small. They are the texture of a life that is actually being lived rather than postponed, and they do not require perfect presence, whatever that would mean. They require only that you have become willing to be here more often than you are not, that the default, which used to be escape, has begun to shift toward contact, that the silence, which used to feel like a threat, has begun to feel, at least sometimes, like home. If what we have been exploring here is touching something real in you, if you have been sitting with these words and feeling the particular recognition of someone who has been running for a long time and is beginning to suspect they do not have to, then I want to say something directly to you. You are not alone in this, not even slightly. This is one of the most widespread and least discussed forms of suffering in contemporary life. The suffering of people who have everything they need and yet cannot bring themselves to be present to any of it. The suffering of people who are free and yet experience their freedom primarily as a pressure to run. There are thousands of people watching this right now who know exactly what this feels like, who have never spoken it out loud, who have been carrying it in silence because the culture does not have good language for it. I make these videos because I believe that finding the language, examining the experience, thinking carefully together about what it means to be a human being alive right now, this matters. This is not entertainment. This is inquiry. And inquiry, as Arendt believed, is one of the most fundamentally human things we can do together. If you want to continue this conversation, if you want to be part of a community of people who are willing to ask the hard questions and sit with the uncomfortable answers, please subscribe. Not because I need the numbers, but because the thinking is better when more people are doing it together. And if something specific in what we explored today landed for you, please leave it in the comments. I read everyone. Your reflection becomes part of the ongoing conversation, and it matters more than you know. What remains then is the question of how to begin. And here Arendt's concept of natality becomes not just philosophically interesting, but genuinely practical. You begin where you are, not where you wish you were, not in the imagined future where you have already become the person who is comfortable with silence and presence and the full weight of their own freedom. You begin here in the actual moment with whatever resistance and whatever restlessness is present right now. You notice that you are about to reach for an escape. You pause for 1 second before reaching. You do not need to not reach. You just need to notice. That noticing is itself a beginning. It is the first act of genuine presence, the first small exercise of the freedom you have been running from. And then you do it again and again. Not perfectly, not without backsliding, not in the triumphant way of someone who has conquered their nature, in the humble and stubborn way of someone who has decided, without drama and without certainty, to try being here, to try letting their own life be the place they live rather than the place they escape from, to try, in Arendt's words, to be the beginning that they are, unprecedented, unrepeatable, and genuinely free. You already know this life is yours. What you are learning slowly with every moment of chosen presence is that you do not have to earn the right to inhabit it. You only have to stay.